Hi everyone. Tonight we will step into a glistening moon-silver realm where the air smells faintly of jasmine and frost, where towers carved from pale crystal stretch toward a sky streaked with violet clouds, and where shadows dance in the torchlight like whispers from another world. The marble steps glisten underfoot, cool and smooth, leading you into a palace where silence feels alive and every corner hides a secret. You can almost hear the low hum of magic in the walls. See the way the light bends through stained glass into ripples of gold and emerald across the floor. Somewhere beyond these echoing halls, an elf queen sits upon her throne, her taste in food the most notorious in all the realms. If you really enjoy what I'm doing, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to leave a comment about where you are watching the video and at what time. Trust me, it will be interesting to see someone somewhere on this planet is just like you. Now, let's dim the lights, get into bed, cover ourselves with a blanket, and relax our entire body. Don't think about anything, just focus on tonight's journey. You are still catching your breath from the uphill climb through the mist-draped hills when the royal messenger thrusts the summons into your hands. The wax seal bears the crescent emblem of Queen Lyriel herself, a summons not to be ignored. The parchment reads in flowing silver script, "By royal decree, your presence is commanded at once to serve as personal chef to Her Moon Majesty. Report to the palace kitchens before the night's third bell." Your cottage kitchen, humble and well-worn, still smells faintly of the morning's bread when you set down the letter. The weight of the words hits you in waves. Honor, yes, but also danger. Every tavern tale agrees, no cook lasts more than a fortnight in her service. Her palate is sharper than a blade, her standards colder than winter's bite. The journey to the moonlit palace is a blur of hoofbeats, rushing streams, and lanterns glowing in the fog. The closer you get, the more the air changes, crisper, tinged with mint and moonlight. By the time the palace gates rise before you, guarded by two silent sentinels in silver armor, you are acutely aware that your simple leather satchel of spices and knives is the only barrier between you and professional ruin. A steward in a long indigo coat meets you in the courtyard. His name, he says, is Seren, and he moves with the precision of someone who has never once been late. He escorts you through endless corridors of marble and glass, past whispering courtiers who glance your way as though sizing up a curiosity. The palace smells faintly of lavender and baking bread, but not the kind you've ever made. This bread has a sweet, airy perfume, as if made from clouds. The kitchen, when you reach it, is a cathedral of culinary ambition. High arched ceilings, enchanted chandeliers that dim and brighten at the head chef's command, and rows of brass pots that polish themselves. There are at least 20 other cooks bustling about, though you notice how they keep their eyes low and their voices hushed. You have barely set down your satchel when Seren clears his throat and says, "Her Majesty wishes to see you, immediately." The throne room's vastness swallows sound. Queen Lyriel sits like a sculpture carved from living moonlight, her hair spilling over her shoulders in shimmering silver waves. Her eyes are the pale green of frostbitten leaves, unblinking as they sweep over you. She is draped in silks that shift color with every movement, one moment pearl, the next pale lilac. "You are the new chef," she says, not asks. Her voice is quiet, yet each word lands like a stone in water, sending ripples through you. "You will cook for me tonight. One dish, something that speaks your truth. If it pleases me, you will remain. If not, you will be gone before dawn." There is no time for stammering replies. You bow, heart pounding, and return to the kitchen. Your mind races. Truth on a plate? You think of the flavors that made you, the comfort dishes of your childhood, the hearty stews of your homeland. But will those rustic tastes survive the scrutiny of an elf queen raised on lunar delicacies? You choose quickly. A slow-braised root vegetable and venison pie, infused with forest herbs and topped with a golden, flaky crust. The venison you trim with careful hands. The herbs you crush until their fragrance fills the air with green, earthy promise. In the back of your mind, you hear the other cooks whispering. Someone mutters about the test and how no one ever truly passes it. When the pie emerges from the oven, steam curling like warm breath in winter, you place it on a silver platter. The crust glistens under the enchanted lights. You can only hope its flavor matches its beauty. The steward leads you once more to the throne room. A servant sets the pie before the queen and slices a neat wedge into a porcelain plate. She lifts a fork, cuts a small piece, and tastes. Her expression does not change. She sets the fork down. A long silence follows. You can feel the gaze of every courtier, every guard, every servant in the room. Finally, Queen Lyriel speaks. You may remain, for now. It is not praise. It is a reprieve. And you know, with cold certainty, that the real test has only just begun.
The relief of surviving your first night in the moonlit palace lasts only until dawn. The kitchen is already alive with the clang of copper lids and the hiss of steam when you arrive, hoping to settle into some kind of rhythm. Instead, you are met with stares, some curious, some cold. The other chefs keep their hands busy while their eyes follow you, as if waiting for the moment you'll stumble. At the far counter, a tall, angular elf with hair the color of burnished copper lifts one eyebrow at you. "So, you're the human who survived her first taste test," he says, his voice laced with something between admiration and mockery. "Name's Vielle. I've lasted here 6 months. That makes me practically immortal." He grins, but his eyes are sharp. Before you can answer, the kitchen doors swing open. In strides Seren, the steward, carrying a small silver tray. On it rests a folded parchment. He holds it out to you, as if it might explode. "It is from Her Majesty," he says, his voice as calm as ever. You take the note and unfold it. The handwriting is as precise as a jeweler's cut. "Tonight you will prepare something delicate, something that floats on the tongue like mist. Surprise me." No ingredient list, no further guidance. The message is both a challenge and a trap. You think of the Queen's pale, poised expression last night, of how she gave nothing away. Vielle peers over your shoulder. "Delicate," he repeats. "That's her favorite word when she's about to hate something." You spend the morning scouring the pantry and storerooms. Shelves stacked with crystal jars hold powders of colors you've never seen: silver blue, midnight violet, shimmering gold. Some ingredients hum faintly when you touch them, but most are useless without knowing their origins or how they react when cooked. One jar catches your attention: moon sugar dust. It sparkles like frost in candlelight. You've heard of it only in legends. It melts instantly on the tongue, leaving a whisper of sweetness and a strange warmth that lingers, perfect for delicate, but dangerous. Too much, and it overpowers everything else. You imagine the dessert, a puff pastry shell filled with whipped cloudberry cream, dusted with moon sugar, light enough to vanish in a bite. But you also imagine her picking up the fork, tasting, and then declaring it too simple. The Queen is said to despise predictability almost as much as she despises mediocrity. As the day wears on, the tension in the kitchen thickens. The other cooks work silently, occasionally throwing you sidelong glances. One young apprentice drops a copper bowl with a clatter, startling you out of your thoughts. It's nearly sunset when Seren reappears. "Her Majesty will dine in the Eastern Solarium tonight. She expects you to deliver the dish yourself." That's unusual. Normally, the servants present the food. Delivering it yourself means she'll watch you, maybe even question you before the first bite. Your heart beats faster as you assemble the dessert. The pastry shells are fragile, flaking at the lightest touch. The cream is pale pink, scented faintly of vanilla and something wilder, an herb you added in secret, one from your homeland, to give the dish a hidden depth. You dust each shell with moon sugar, watching the crystals catch the light. The eastern solarium is a round chamber lined with tall windows. Outside, the garden glows under a nearly full moon. The queen sits at a small table draped in silver-threaded cloth, her hands resting in her lap. Tonight her gown is deep blue, as if she's wearing a piece of the night sky. She gestures for you to approach. "What is this?" You bow slightly. "Cloudberry cream in a pastry shell, dusted with moon sugar, Your Majesty. It is meant to vanish as quickly as the moment it recalls." Her eyebrow arches, just barely. She takes a bite. The pastry crunches faintly. The cream vanishes on her tongue, and for the smallest instant her eyes half close. Then they open again, unreadable. "You may go," she says. Your pulse still hasn't settled by the time you're back in the kitchen. Vael is waiting. "No verdict?" he asks. You shape your head. He laughs quietly. "That's worse than an insult. That means she's still deciding. You'll know tomorrow, if you're still here." That night, sleep is hard to find. You dream of the queen's pale eyes and the sound of her voice saying, "Surprise me." You wake before dawn with the feeling that the real challenge has yet to begin.
By the third morning, you begin to understand the strange, almost oppressive rhythm of the moonlit palace kitchen. The work starts long before sunrise, the windows still black with night, and continues without pause until the last ember fades in the great hearth. There are no idle moments. If a chef is not chopping, stirring, kneading, or tasting, they are cleaning, polishing, or arranging. Even the air feels charged, as if every breath carries a silent warning. One mistake, and you're done. You're rolling dough for breakfast pastries when you notice the hush that falls over the room. A pair of courtiers have stepped through the kitchen doors, an intrusion so rare it might as well be an eclipse. They move gracefully between the counters, eyes scanning every surface. The taller one, a woman with hair like pale gold, leans toward the head chef and whispers something. The head chef's expression tightens, but he nods. Then, without preamble, she turns to you. "You are the queen's newest pet cook," she says, the words sweet as poisoned honey. "You should know that there are expectations here. You will hear many things. You will ignore most of them if you are wise." Her companion smirks. "And be careful who you share a cutting board with. Not everyone is pleased you've survived 2 nights." They leave without waiting for a response. The other cooks resume their work, but now you notice the quick glances, the half-hidden smirks, the way conversations pause when you pass. By midday, you've heard enough whispers to piece together the truth. The palace kitchens are a nest of rivalries, and every chef wants the queen's favor because it is the surest path to influence. Those who have lost her favor, whether through a poorly timed remark or a single under-seasoned bite, are reassigned to scrub floors, or worse, sent away entirely. Vale, polishing a set of silver ladles, notices your frown. He says, "Ah, you've met the courtiers. They're worse than the cooks. They'll feed you half a story and watch you choke on it." I lower my voice. "And the cooks? Are they always so guarded?" His smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Some will smile to your face and pour vinegar in your soup the moment you turn your back. Others will hand you a rare herb just to see if you can ruin it. Best advice? Trust no one, not even me." That night you prepare the queen's supper, a roasted trout glazed with honey and thyme, served with moon turnip mash. The fish is delicate, the flavors balanced. You check the glaze 3 times, fearing a misstep.
Halfway through plating, you reach for the time jar and find it nearly empty. Strange, you checked it earlier and it was full. You glance around, but no one meets your eyes. Your pulse spikes. If you hadn't noticed, the flavor would have been off just enough to matter. You adjust, using a smaller amount and compensating with lemon zest. But the message is clear. Someone is already testing you. When the queen tastes the dish, her gaze lingers on you a moment longer than usual. Acceptable, she says. It is neither praise nor condemnation, but in this palace, acceptable is a narrow bridge over a long drop. After the meal, you pass through the servants' corridor and overhear two voices from the pantry. Not long before she makes a mistake. She'll make one if we help her along. You pause, hidden in the shadows, your fists tightening. Whoever they are, they've marked you as prey. Back in your small chamber above the kitchens, you stare at the ceiling beams while the night wind rattles the shutters. The palace is not just a place of culinary excellence. It is a battlefield where knives aren't the only things that cut. If you are to survive here, you will have to cook flawlessly, yes, but you will also have to watch, listen, and learn who in this place wants you gone. And maybe, just maybe, you'll have to make sure they taste the bitterness they've prepared for you.
The summons comes just after the morning meal, while you are cleaning a stack of copper pots that weigh as much as small anvils. Seren appears in the doorway, his coat immaculate as always, his expression unreadable. "Her Majesty has a request," he says. "You are to accompany me to the midnight garden." The words spark a flicker of recognition. You heard the name whispered in the kitchen, usually in the same tone one might use for haunted places or forbidden rooms. The midnight garden, they say, holds plants that bloom only under moonlight, ingredients so rare that even the queen herself must ration them. You follow Seren through a series of narrow corridors that slope downward, the air growing cooler with each step. The sound of the palace fades, replaced by the faint trickle of water. At the base of a spiral staircase, you pass through an archway into open night, yet you know you are still within the palace walls. Before you stretches a garden unlike anything you've seen. The air is heavy with the perfume of strange flowers, their petals glowing faintly in the dark. A canopy of black-bark trees filters the moonlight into silver threads that dance across the grass. Tiny insects, with wings like shards of crystal, drift lazily between blossoms. In the center of the garden stands Queen Lyriel. She wears no crown tonight, only a simple gown of midnight blue that makes her hair shine all the more. She turns at your approach, her gaze landing on you as though she has been expecting you for hours. "There are moon blossoms in bloom tonight," she says. "They will not open again for another year. I want them in my supper." Moon blossoms. You've only read of them. Delicate white petals that, when steeped, release a flavor like honey mixed with starlight. They are notoriously difficult to handle. Bruise them even slightly, and they turn bitter. Seren hands you a small silver basket. "Only take those that have fully opened," he says. "And be mindful of the dew. It is part of their essence." You move carefully among the glowing flowers, the grass whispering under your boots. The blossoms are cool to the touch, their petals softer than silk. Each time you pick one, a faint pulse of warmth travels through your fingers, as though the plant is sighing. When the basket is full, the queen nods once and walks away without another word. You are left to follow Seren back through the winding corridors, your mind already turning over possibilities. In the kitchen, you decide on a dish, poached riverfish with moon blossom infusion, accompanied by steamed greens and a drizzle of citrus. The challenge will be preserving the blossom's fragile flavor through the cooking process. You set a small pot of water to simmer, adding the petals at just the right moment, watching as they release their faint golden hue. Vale sidles up beside you, leaning against the counter. Moon blossoms? Careful. You mess this up, you'll wish you'd never set foot here. You ignore him, focusing on the fish, which you wrap in leaves to poach gently in the infusion. When you plate it, the aroma is subtle yet intoxicating, a mingling of floral sweetness and fresh river air. That evening, in the throne room, the queen tastes the dish. She closes her eyes briefly, as though listening to some distant sound. When she opens them, she gives the faintest nod. "You have a careful hand," she says. "That is rare." It is the closest she has come to praise. But as you leave the hall, you notice a figure watching from the shadows near the door, one of the courtiers who had warned you on your second day. Her expression is unreadable, but you feel a prickle of unease. In this place, attention is as dangerous as neglect. You return to your chamber that night with the lingering scent of moon blossoms on your hands, and the uncomfortable sense that you've just stepped deeper into the queen's game.
The day after the moon blossom supper, you rise with the feeling that the air itself is expectant, as though the palace is holding its breath. The kitchen is quieter than usual, not in the sense of calm, but in the way people go silent before a storm. You're slicing root vegetables when you overhear two scullery maids gossiping near the water barrels. "Said she hasn't eaten like that in years. Must have reminded her of when she was young." Their eyes flick toward you, and they stop talking immediately. Curiosity gnaws at you. If the queen has a taste for something from her youth, it could be your first real advantage, if you can discover what it is. Vaillant notices your distracted chopping and smirks, thinking about how to stay alive another week. You set the knife down. "Do you know what the queen used to eat as a child?" He pretends to think. "Probably golden pears and angel cake served on crystal plates. But if you want actual information, talk to the oldest staff. They've been here since before she wore a crown." That advice leads you to the laundry wing, where steam curls through the air and the smell of lye soap clings to your clothes. There you find Tellen, an elderly elf with eyes like storm clouds and hands permanently wrinkled from decades of work. When you ask, he chuckles softly. "Oh, she was a different creature then, barefoot in the orchard, hair full of leaves. Her favorite was a porridge made from sun-grain and wild honey, simple, sweet, and warm. She used to demand it for breakfast every equinox morning." You thank him, tucking the detail away. But you also wonder why something so simple would vanish from her table. Perhaps it was tied to memories she no longer wishes to revisit. That evening, you decide to take a risk. For supper, you prepare her requested main course, a roasted pheasant with winter herbs, but also send up a small bowl of sun-grain porridge as an accompaniment, saying nothing about its history. When you deliver the tray, the queen's attention falls first on the pheasant. She tastes it, offers a small nod, then glances at the bowl. "What is this?" she says. "An old recipe from the lowlands," you say carefully. "It pairs well with the meat." She takes a single spoonful. For a moment, something shifts in her expression. Her gaze softens, her lips part slightly. But it vanishes in an instant, replaced by the cool mask she always wears. "You may leave," she says. Later that night, as you're cleaning the counters, Saren appears beside you. "A word of advice," he says quietly. The queen values precision, but she values discretion more. Do not remind her of things she has chosen to forget, unless she asks you to. You can't tell if it's a warning or a veiled compliment. Still, you notice the next morning that your assignment in the kitchen has changed. You are no longer stationed at the side counter with the other newcomers. You have been moved to the center prep table, directly under the head chef's eye. The other cooks notice too. Some scowl, others watch you more closely than before. You've gained something, though you're not sure if it's safety or simply a higher place from which to fall. That night, in your chamber, you think of the queen's fleeting expression when she tasted the porridge. It wasn't quite happiness, but it wasn't displeasure either. There's something there, something tied to her past, and you suspect that if you can understand it, you might finally learn what it truly takes to win her favor.
The day of the Feast of First Frost begins with frost itself, a thin silver layer coating the palace windows, turning the gardens into crystal. The kitchen fires are already roaring when you arrive, and the air hums with urgency. This is one of the most important events of the year, a banquet marking the start of winter. Nobles from across the realm will attend, and every dish must be flawless. Head Chef Malif gathers the team at the center table. You all know what's at stake. The queen expects nothing less than perfection. If a dish is even near perfection, it will be sent back. And remember, this year she has a new personal chef, he says, his eyes landing on you, which means there is no room for error. The menu is overwhelming. Spiced hare stew, glazed winter pears, roasted squash with frost chive butter, cloudfish pâté, sugared holly berries, and the main centerpiece, a stag roast prepared with the palace's signature frost wine glaze. Your assigned task is both an honor and a gamble. You're responsible for preparing one of the queen's personal plates for the main course. Val sidles up as you sharpen your knives. Congratulations, he says. You're in the line of fire now. One wrong move and the frost wine will be the least cold thing in the room. The kitchen becomes a blur of movement, steam rising, knives flashing, the steady thump of dough being kneaded. You work quickly but carefully, ensuring each cut of meat is perfect, each garnish placed with precision. The frost wine glaze is a dangerous ingredient. Too little, and the flavor disappears. Too much, and it overwhelms everything. You measure every drop with the same caution you'd give to handling poison. Hours pass. Outside, you can hear faint strains of music and laughter as guests begin to arrive. The scent of roasted stag and baked pears fills the air, rich and warm. Your hands are steady, but you can feel the tension in your shoulders, the weight of knowing that your plate will be judged more closely than most. Finally, the dishes are ready. Footmen carry them to the great hall where the queen sits at the head of a long crystal table. You can't see her from the kitchen, but you can imagine her gaze moving over the spread, measuring every detail. Moments later, Saren returns, not with the grim face you feared, but with a single silver platter. On it rests your plate, untouched. His Majesty requests that you bring this to her yourself, he says. Your stomach twists. You carry the plate into the great hall, the sound of your footsteps echoing in the vast space. Hundreds of eyes follow you. The queen watches as you approach, her expression unreadable. You set the plate before her. She cuts into the meat, tasting the glaze. A long pause follows, then she says, in a voice that carries across the table, "Acceptable." There's a ripple of relief, although, in the strange logic of this court, acceptable is still high praise. But then she adds, "I will expect more from you next year." It's both a warning and an invitation.
You bow and retreat, heart still pounding. Back in the kitchen, the other chefs are already beginning to clean, the night's chaos giving way to exhaustion. Val tosses you a rag and says, "Not bad, newcomer. You survived first frost. Most don't." When you finally reach your chamber, you collapse on the bed, muscles aching. The Queen's words echo in your mind, more from you next year. It isn't victory exactly, but it isn't defeat either. And in this palace, that might be the closest thing to triumph.
You are still basking, cautiously, in the relief of surviving the feast of first frost when the blow falls. It happens the next morning. You arrive in the kitchen to find the air thick with tension and a strange smell lingering under the scent of baking bread, something faintly sour. The head chef's eyes are sharp as he motions you over. On the counter sits a silver bowl of cloudberry preserves, meant for the Queen's breakfast pastries. You lean in to inspect it, and your stomach turns. The preserves have been spiked with vinegar. Not enough to make them inedible at first bite, but enough to sour them after a moment, enough for the Queen to spit them out and demand the name of the cook who prepared them. "Who touched this?" Maelith demands. The other cooks shrug or shake their heads too quickly. You know instantly this was deliberate. The preserves were your responsibility today. You scan the room. Vale is at his station, polishing spoons with exaggerated innocence. A young apprentice is pretending to sort herbs, but you catch her stealing glances in your direction. "I can fix it," you say quickly, already reaching for fresh berries. Maelith narrows his eyes, but steps aside. "You have 15 minutes," he warns. It's a frantic race. You crush berries, add sugar, boil the mixture just long enough to thicken without losing its brightness. Every second feels too long, every step too slow. When the new preserves are ready, you taste them. Perfectly balanced, sweet with just enough tartness to sing. You hand them off to the footman, who hurries them to the Queen's table. Minutes later, Seren appears in the doorway. His gaze sweeps over the kitchen, settling on you. "His Majesty enjoyed her breakfast," he says simply, before turning to leave. The moment he's gone, Vale lets out a low whistle. "You were one bite away from the end of your career, newcomer." You already knew that. What you don't know is why or who. You spend the rest of the day in quiet vigilance. Every jar you open, every ingredient you touch, you check twice. You keep your knives within reach. At one point, you catch the apprentice from earlier watching you again, her eyes darting away when you look up. That evening, after service, you wander the servants' corridor, letting the low hum of conversation guide you. Near the pantry, you pause when you hear a voice, low, hushed. "We'll need something less obvious." You edge closer, but the footsteps move away before you can identify them. Back in your chamber, you sit on the bed, staring at the wall. The sabotage is not just a warning, it's an opening move in a game you haven't agreed to play. But you have a decision to make. Stay on the defensive, or start moving pieces of your own. The next morning, you are barely through the kitchen doors when Seren appears with a folded parchment. "From Her Majesty," he says, his tone unreadable. You break the seal and read, "Tonight you will compete. The dish will be of your choosing. The other will be chosen for you." Your eyes flick up. Compete with whom? Seren offers no answer, only the faintest shrug before disappearing into the hallway. It doesn't take long to learn the rest. Word travels quickly in the palace. Tonight, the Queen will stage a cooking contest between you and Vale. The rules are simple.
Each of you will prepare one dish of your invention and one dish dictated by the queen. She will taste both and decide which of you better deserves her trust. The head chef makes no attempt to hide his disapproval. Don't think of this as a friendly match, Malith warns. It's a culling. One of you will be gone by morning. You spend the morning walking the pantry, fingertips brushing jars and baskets, mind turning over possibilities. Your signature dish must be bold enough to outshine Vale's skill and charm, but not so risky that it alienates the queen's impossible tastes. You decide on a savory moon herb tart, using a rare blend of forest greens with a subtle smoky undertone from fire-seared garlic. By midday, Seren returns with the queen's chosen challenge, a traditional elven delicacy known as frost flower consommé. It's a crystal-clear broth made from frost flower petals and bone stock, requiring hours of patient skimming to achieve the proper clarity. The petals themselves are nearly weightless, melting into the broth to release a flavor like chilled spring air. One clouded spoonful will mean failure. Vale catches your eye across the kitchen. You do realize frost flower is notoriously unforgiving, don't you? He says. One extra second of heat and the flavor collapses. I'll keep that in mind, you reply, though your hands are already itching to start. The afternoon passes in a blur of chopping, kneading, and tasting. Your moon herb tart begins to take shape, the crust golden and delicate. For the consommé, you keep the pot at the barest simmer, lifting away impurities with steady, precise movements. You time the frost flower addition to the breath, watching the petals dissolve like snowflakes in warm hands. As sunset nears, both dishes are ready. You place them side by side on the prep table, feeling the weight of every decision in their presentation. Vale's creations look immaculate. His signature dish, a shimmering silverfish roulade, glistens under the lantern light, while his consommé is so clear it might be liquid glass. The throne room is hushed when the dishes are carried in. The queen sits forward in her chair, eyes moving from one plate to the other. She tastes Vale's roulade first, then yours. No reaction. She moves to the consommés, tasting his, then yours. Again, her expression is unreadable. Finally, she speaks. Both show skilled. One shows restraint. One shows daring. I require both in my kitchen. The words sink in slowly. You have both survived. Vale gives you a wry smile that's half relief, half something sharper. As you leave the hall, you can't shake the feeling that this contest was never about choosing between you. It was about seeing how far each of you could be pushed before breaking. And the queen, you suspect, is far from done pushing.
The frost flower consommé is barely washed from your hands when the next command arrives. This time, it's delivered not by Seren, but by a guard in moon-silver armor who looks as though he's been carved from stone. He offers a scroll sealed with the royal crest. Inside, the queen's words are short and sharp. I desire something I have not tasted in years. Find it, prepare it, do not speak of it to anyone. Beneath the script is a single clue written in smaller letters. The spice that sings at midnight. You turn the phrase over in your mind as you leave the kitchen. There are hundreds of spices in the palace pantry, none of which sing in any literal sense. But the phrase has a ring of lore about it, something whispered from one cook to another in the dim corners of taverns. Vale passes you near the stairwell, catching the parchment before you can fold it away. The queen's little treasure hunt, is it? His smirk fades when he reads the clue.
You won't find that here. Midnight singing spice is forbidden in this kingdom. Forbidden. The word makes your pulse quicken. Why? Because it's unpredictable. A pinch can make a dish divine. A grain too many can sour an entire feast. And there are stories about what it does to the mind. That night, you lie awake turning over the problem. The clue implies the queen has tasted it before, perhaps in her youth, perhaps beyond the palace walls. If you can find it, you might gain her favor in a way no one else dares. But you'll have to look outside the safety of the kitchens. At dawn, you make your way to the old market district under the guise of sourcing fresh produce. Past stalls of silver apples and skyroot vegetables, you find a spice merchant whose eyes light with recognition when you mention singing. "You mean night voice," he says, lowering his tone. "Comes from blossoms that open only under the blackest part of the night. Their seeds hum when ground, just faintly, almost like music." He produces a tiny jar from under the counter. Inside, the powder shimmers faintly, as though stirred by an invisible breeze. Careful, it has a mind of its own. You pay more than you can afford and return to the palace with the jar hidden deep in your satchel. In the kitchen, you decide on a dish worthy of such risk. A slow braised pheasant with a glaze of honey, citrus, and just a faint dusting of night voice spice. You taste it again and again, adjusting until the balance feels perfect, sweet, bright, and carrying that subtle, elusive hum at the edge of perception. When you present the dish that evening, the queen's gaze lingers on the plate. She takes one bite, and something in her eyes sharpens. Recognition, memory, perhaps even longing. She sets down her fork. She will not speak of this to anyone. Do you understand? You nod. As you turn to leave, she adds, "And you will keep some of that spice for me." The order is not just about flavor, it's about trust. And you know now you hold something rare, perhaps too rare for your own safety.
2 days after the night voice dish, the queen's request arrives in a way that startles even you, not on parchment, but in person. It happens in the quiet lull between the midday meal and evening preparations. You're alone at the central prep table, trimming the stems from a bundle of frost chives, when a faint shift in the air makes you look up. Queen Lirael stands in the doorway. No courtiers, no guards, no Seren. The kitchen freezes. Even the enchanted chandeliers seem to dim in deference. Her gaze finds you, unerring. "Walk with me," she says. You follow her into a side corridor, the hush so deep you can hear your own heartbeat. She leads you to a small antechamber lined with porcelain teacups and crystal jars of rare infusions. The scent here is soft, mint, rose, a whisper of cinnamon. "I wish for a meal tonight that no one will see, not my court, not my stewards, only me." The request is strange. Every meal you've cooked for her has been served under the watchful eyes of half the palace. "May I ask what kind of dish you would like, Your Majesty?" Her lips curve slightly, though it's not quite a smile. Something humble, something the court would never understand. When she leaves, you remain standing among the shelves, mind racing. Humble is not a word you've ever associated with the queen, yet something in her tone suggests this is not a trap. It's a moment she is granting you, though you can't yet see why. Back in the kitchen, you keep your preparations discreet. You tell the other cooks you're working on a staff meal, and most barely glance your way. In truth, you begin crafting a dish from your own memories, a rustic stew of root vegetables, tender pheasant, and wild herbs, slow cooked until the flavors meld into something warm and grounding. You bake a small round of coarse bread to serve with it, the crust dark and crisp, the inside soft and steaming. For dessert, you prepare honeyed figs, the kind that stick to your fingers. When the meal is ready, you wrap the bread in linen and carry everything yourself to the Queen's private sitting room, a place you've never been. The chamber is smaller than you expected, with bookshelves crowding the walls and a single window looking out over the moonlit gardens. She sits in a high-backed chair, reading by lamplight. You set the tray on the low table. She dismisses the lone attendant with a flick of her hand, then gestures for you to sit. The Queen eats in silence at first. Then, halfway through the stew, she says, "This tastes like the riverlands, like the cottages near the harvest fields." You nod. "It's a recipe from my home." She dips a piece of bread into the broth, her eyes distant. "My mother took me to the riverlands once, before the crown. We ate like this, sitting on the grass. The court would call it peasant fare." You don't answer. You simply let the warmth of the stew fill the silence between you. When she finishes, she sets down her spoon and says, "There is more to a chef than skill. There is knowing when to make a dish speak and when to let it listen." It feels like a lesson, though you can't yet tell what for. As you leave her chambers, you realize something unsettling. This was the first time you've seen Queen Lorraine without the armor of her courtly mask, and you suspect she knows exactly how much that will linger in your mind.
The morning after the quiet supper, the palace hums with anticipation for the Festival of Falling Stars. It's an annual event, though this will be your first time seeing it from within the palace walls. You've heard whispers about the spectacle. At night, when the skies blaze with meteors, when the air is alive with music, and when the Queen hosts a banquet under the open heavens. In the kitchen, head chef Malalith is in rare form, issuing orders with military precision. The menu is ambitious, even by palace standards. 20 courses, each designed to reflect a different star. There will be silver-laced pastries, flame-grilled cloudfish, starlit berry sorbets, and a centerpiece so extravagant it has its own cart. A confectionery dome spun entirely from sugar threads that shimmer like frost. Your assignment is to prepare the first dish the Queen herself will taste, an amuse-bouche, small enough to fit in the palm, bright enough to awaken the senses, and memorable enough to set the tone for the entire evening. You choose to craft a single bite of fire-peach-glazed quail, served on a spoon with a pearl of frost wine gel. The contrast, the heat of the peach, the chill of the wine, is meant to echo the fire and ice of the night sky. As the day slips into twilight, the palace terraces are transformed. Silk banners ripple in the breeze, and the tables gleam under hundreds of enchanted lanterns. Beyond the gardens, the first meteors streak the horizon. When you bring the amuse-bouche to the Queen's table, she studies it for a heartbeat longer than usual before tasting. The corner of her mouth turns upward, not quite a smile, but enough to make your pulse quicken. Then the night begins in earnest. Musicians play beneath the stars, and dishes flow from the kitchen in a steady, glittering parade. You work without pause, ferrying platters, adjusting garnishes, ensuring every plate reaches the guests in perfect form. But even amid the chaos, you feel the magic of the night pressing in. At one point, you glance up through the terrace arches to see a meteor blaze directly overhead, its tail fanning across the sky in a silver arc. Gasps rise from the guests. Even the Queen tilts her head slightly, her expression momentarily unguarded.
Near midnight, you step briefly out of the kitchen for a breath of cool air. The meteors fall in waves now, painting the garden in shifting light. A voice beside you says, "It's something, isn't it?" You turn to see the mysterious palace servant you've glimpsed before, a shadow among shadows. Tonight he wears a simple black tunic, blending into the dark. First time seeing it? You nod. It's more than I expected. He smiles faintly. The queen always looks forward to this night. She says it reminds her that beauty is fleeting. Maybe that's why she demands so much from her cooks. Every dish has to burn bright, then vanish. Before you can reply, he melts back into the shadows, leaving you with the sound of distant applause and the rush of your own thoughts. Back in the kitchen, the final courses are being plated. Your hands move on instinct now, the rhythm of the night carrying you forward. When the last dish leaves the counter, exhaustion floods in, but so does something else, a quiet pride. You've survived another high-stakes banquet, and somewhere in the space between meteors and music, you may have earned another sliver of the queen's approval.
The palace feels quieter after the festival of falling stars, as if the walls themselves are catching their breath. But the calm doesn't last. You're in the kitchen early, skimming broth for the midday meal when the world shifts. Not violently, just a settled slip, the kind you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. It comes in the form of voices, hushed but urgent, carrying from the far pantry. She's meeting with them in secret. And if the council finds out? They won't, unless someone talks. You freeze, ladle in hand. The pantry door is cracked just enough to let the steam curl inside, just enough for you to hear the tension in their voices. You can't see who's speaking, but the tone is unmistakably noble, not servants or kitchen staff. The broth hisses softly behind you, but you keep still, every sense straining toward the gap. I'm telling you, the queen's been speaking with the envoys without the council's approval. If word gets out, there'll be more than just whispers about her reign. A pause. Then we make sure it doesn't get out. Or we make sure it gets out on our terms. The scrape of boots on stone, and the conversation ends. You slip back to your station, feigning focus on the broth, as two figures emerge from the pantry, both dressed in the fine but understated garb of court advisors. Neither so much as glances at you as they leave. You try to shake it off. Politics is the air the palace breathes, but this felt different, sharp, deliberate. And the fact that you overheard it by accident makes you wonder how much you're supposed to know. Still, you keep working. The broth needs to be perfect. The queen notices the smallest flaws. You add herbs, taste, adjust. But now the flavor is tangled with unease. When Seren comes to collect the dish, he notices your distraction. Something wrong? You shake your head. Just tired. But his eyes narrow, as though he knows you're lying. That evening, the queen tastes the soup in her private dining chamber. She doesn't comment on the flavor, but when she sets the spoon down, she studies you for a moment longer than usual. "You hear much working in my kitchens," she says. It isn't a question. "Yes, Your Majesty." Her gaze sharpens. "And you will keep it there." You bow, the words coming automatically. "Of course." Later, alone in your chamber, you replay the pantry conversation in your mind. It's not your place to involve yourself in court affairs, but you can't ignore the edge in those voices, the sense of a blade hidden in silk. In this palace, danger doesn't just come with a knife in the kitchen. Sometimes it comes in whispers over a pot of soup.
The day after the overheard pantry whispers, you expect to return to the usual rhythm of kitchen work, watching for sabotage, keeping your head down, making sure every plate leaving your station is flawless. Instead, something shifts. It begins with a small thing, a sprig of frost chive left neatly by your knives, wrapped in linen to keep it fresh. No one admits to placing it there. Then later, while you're fetching spices from the upper shelves, you find the jar you need already set out at your station, measured to the gram. By mid-afternoon, you're certain these aren't coincidences. Someone is helping you. You catch your first glimpse of them during the evening rush. A tall figure in a plain black tunic slips into the kitchen through the servants' corridor, moving like a shadow between stations. He doesn't speak, doesn't look at anyone directly, just sets a bundle of freshly washed moon herbs on your counter before vanishing again. It takes you a few moments to realize it's the same servant you saw during the Festival of Falling Stars. That night, as you leave the kitchen, you find him waiting in the dimly lit courtyard, standing just outside the glow of the lanterns. "You're careful," he says. "That's why you've lasted this long." I fold my arms. "And you've been helping me?" He tilts his head slightly. "Call it balancing the scales. You have enemies you don't see coming. I'd rather they didn't win. Yet." The "yet" lands like a small stone in your stomach. "Why?" A faint smile touches his lips. "Because you're interesting, and the Queen is watching." Before you can press for more, he's already moving toward the servants' wing. "Name's Chiron," he says over his shoulder. "If you're smart, you'll forget you know it." In the days that follow, his assistance continues. A pot pulled from the fire before it scorches, a wrong delivery of fish corrected before you notice, an absent apprentice whose station is mysteriously covered until she returns. But Chiron's presence comes with an unspoken cost. His knowledge of palace undercurrents is obvious. Sometimes, when he glances toward a doorway or pauses in conversation, you can almost feel the tension in the air before someone dangerous arrives. One evening, as you're finishing the Queen's supper, a delicate herb-crusted trout, he appears at your elbow. "Don't serve the greens," he murmurs. "Replace them with steamed root medallions." There's no time to ask why. You make the switch, plating the dish as he slips away. Later, Seren delivers a rare comment as he returns the empty plate. A wise substitution. You don't ask questions. But that night, as you lie in bed, you can't help wondering what would have happened if you hadn't listened. Chiron's help is quiet, invisible, but unmistakable. In a palace where almost everyone seems eager to see you fail, his presence feels like a shield you never asked for, one you're not sure you can trust.
3 days after Chiron's first warning, Seren delivers a message that sets the entire kitchen on edge. "The Queen will host the Duke of Calvras tomorrow evening. He has particular tastes." Particular, in palace language, often means impossible. You've never met the Duke, but you've heard of him. A man who travels with his own taster, refuses dishes served on certain metals, and sends back anything that feels wrong in the mouth. Head chef Maleth gathers the staff. "This is not a feast," she says. "It's a duel." The Duke enjoys forcing chefs into mistakes and then ridiculing them for sport. "Tonight we prepare as if our positions depend on it, because they do." You're assigned the main course, a position both enviable and dangerous. The queen insists her guests experience the full strength of her kitchen, and that means the main dish is the meal's crown jewel. Chiron drifts through the preparations that evening, his presence light but deliberate. At one point he stops by your station and murmurs. The Duke hates garlic, won't say it outright, but it ruins the entire night for him. Then he's gone again, leaving you staring at the recipe you'd been sketching, which, of course, relies heavily on garlic for its base. You scrap it. Instead, you choose roasted river stag with a glaze of honeyed pomegranate paired with a puree of star root and moon saffron. The flavor is bold without being overwhelming, the textures rich but smooth. On the day of the dinner, the kitchen becomes a crucible. The Duke's taster hovers like a shadow at the pass, sniffing every plate, occasionally demanding to know the exact provenance of an ingredient. Twice, you have to defend the origin of your saffron, producing the sealed jar and the merchant's signature to prove its authenticity. When your dish finally leaves the kitchen, you can feel every muscle in your body tighten. Through the open arch of the dining hall, you watch the Duke take his first bite. His expression is unreadable. Then, slowly, he nods. He says something to the Queen that makes her laugh softly, a sound you rarely hear. The rest of the evening passes without incident, but the tension doesn't fade until Seren returns the empty plate to you in the kitchen. "His Grace asked for seconds," he says simply. It's a victory, but it feels fragile, as though you could shatter if you hold it too tightly. Later, as you're scrubbing down your station, Chiron appears again. "You listened," he says. "I'm not in the habit of ignoring good advice," you reply. His smile is almost approving. Careful. Listening too closely to the wrong person can be worse than ignoring everyone. Then he's gone again, leaving you with the faintest sense that the real duel wasn't in the dining hall at all. It was in the quiet exchanges and unseen choices that led the dish to the table in the first place. The Duke of Calvris's visit leaves the palace buzzing for days, but before the satisfaction can settle, another challenge arrives, one unlike any you've faced before. It comes through Seren, though he seems more hesitant than usual when delivering the news. The Queen wishes for a living dessert for the midwinter masque. You pause mid-chop. Living? Seren nods once, the faintest shadow of a smirk curling at the edge of his mouth. Something that moves, breathes perhaps, yet is still edible. You've heard rumors of such creations, sugar spun into winged creatures that flutter for a few moments before melting into sweetness. Confections with blooming petals that sway as though in a breeze, but they're rare, dangerous to craft, and notoriously temperamental in the cold air of midwinter. Head chef Mayleith makes no attempt to hide her skepticism. If the Queen wants this, it will fall to you. Your hands are steadier than most. Fail, and you'll fail in front of half the kingdom. The pressure is a familiar weight, but this is different. A dish that must move, not just in flavor, but in form, means working with enchantments. And that means stepping beyond the safe confines of culinary skill into a realm where magic can go wrong in spectacular ways. You spend the next day buried in the kitchen's oldest recipe archives, paging through brittle scrolls and leather-bound tomes. Finally, you find it. The whisper wing meringue, a delicate sugar shell, feather-light, encasing a core of aerated cream infused with frost flower nectar. When enchanted properly, the shell sprouts iridescent wings that beat softly for a few minutes before dissolving into sweetness. The instructions are exacting. The sugar must be pulled at a precise temperature. The nectar whisked in at the exact moment the spell takes hold. Too soon, and the wings crumple. Too late, and the dessert refuses to stir. Chiron appears late in your preparations, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Dangerous choice," he says. "It's the only choice," you reply, measuring the nectar drop by drop. He watches in silence for a while, then says, "If it flutters away before she bites it, she'll laugh. If it dies before she sees it, she'll frown. The first is better." The night of the mask arrives with the palace transformed into a glittering frost dream. Guests in masks shaped like stags, wolves, and foxes swirl beneath chandeliers of ice. Outside, snow falls in slow, deliberate flakes, as if timed to the music. When it's time for dessert, you carry the tray yourself. The whisper wings tremble faintly with each step, their shimmering wings catching the candlelight. At the queen's table, you place one before her, holding your breath as the wings twitch, then beat, slow and steady. She watches them for a moment, a small private smile touching her lips, before plucking the creature from the plate and biting into it in a single decisive motion. A murmur of approval ripples through the masked crowd. The queen says nothing, but her gaze lingers on you as you bow and retreat. Back in the kitchen, you finally let the tension drain from your shoulders. The whisperwing had lived just long enough. The midwinter mask fades into memory, but the palace never stays quiet for long. 2 mornings later, Seren appears in the kitchen earlier than usual, his tone clipped. "Pack your knives. You're traveling with the queen." Traveling. The word alone is enough to still every hand in the kitchen. The queen almost never brings her cooks beyond the palace walls, only when she demands absolute control over her meals. "Where?" you ask. "To the Frostmere Lodge," Seren says. "A diplomatic retreat with the northern envoys. The kitchens there are lacking." You can hear the unspoken part. If you fail, the queen will not blame the lodge. By midday, you're riding in a curtained carriage, snow streaming past the windows. Chiron is among the queen's retinue, though he keeps mostly to himself, eyes scanning the frozen landscape like he's expecting danger to emerge from the drifts. Frostmere Lodge is less a hunting lodge and more a fortress carved from ice and stone. Its great hall glitters with frost lamps, and the air smells faintly of pine needles and cold iron. The kitchen, however, is exactly as Seren warned: small, understocked, and manned by staff who look more suited to gutting fish than hosting royalty. The first night's dinner is meant to be a welcoming feast, though most of the ingredients you were promised haven't arrived. The roads, you're told, are buried under snowdrifts. You have to improvise. You choose to build the meal around the one resource you have in abundance, the local river trout, caught fresh from beneath the ice. You poach it gently in a broth of pine needles and wild mushrooms, serving it with roasted tubers and a sauce of reduced winter berries. The queen eats without comment, which in this environment feels like a relief. The northern envoys, however, murmur to one another in a language you don't understand, occasionally glancing toward you. Later, in the dim warmth of the kitchen, Chiron leans against the doorframe. "He's testing you," he says. "If you fail to impress them, the queen loses face. If you succeed, they'll wonder what else she's hiding. You frown. And if I do both? A small, amused sound escapes him. Then you'll survive the week. The days at Frostmere settle into a tense rhythm. You prepare breakfast before the sun rises over the snowfields, plan elaborate dinners with whatever supplies arrive, and listen to the low hum of political negotiation filtering through the stone walls. On the third night, you serve a dish of ice wine glazed venison with charred onion petals. The Queen's gaze meets yours briefly across the table, and you realize something. This trip isn't just about feeding her. It's about proving that her reach, her refinement, extends far beyond the palace. In Frostmere, you're not just her chef, you're part of her arsenal. The negotiations at Frostmere stretch into their fourth day, and the tension in the lodge is almost a physical thing, like frost gathering along your skin. The northern envoys are polite enough at the table, but in the corridors their voices are sharp, their eyes quick to assess every move the Queen makes. That morning, Chiron finds you in the storeroom inspecting the dwindling supplies. "They'll send someone to watch you today," he says. "Watch me?" "Not for your cooking," he replies, "for signs of weakness. They think a palace chef is just another courtier with a knife." You're not sure whether to laugh or bristle, but there's no time to dwell on it. Saren appears to inform you that tonight's dinner will be a private one. The Queen, her closest advisors, and the envoy leader himself. No grand feast to hide behind. Every dish will be under a microscope. You decide to serve snow hare braised in juniper and spiced root wine, plated with frost pear puree and seared greens for color. It's a dish that demands patience. The meat must be coaxed into tenderness over hours, and the sauce reduced until it's almost syrup. As you work, you notice a tall figure lingering near the kitchen doorway. His furs are far finer than the lodge staff's, and his boots are too clean to belong to a hunter. This must be the envoy's man, the one sent to watch. You keep your pace steady, narrating your process under your breath, though not loudly enough for him to hear the full details. He doesn't leave until the moment you hand off the plaited hare to Saren. The private dinner passes in near silence, save for the occasional clink of silver. From your station, just outside the hall, you can't see their faces, but you hear the Queen's voice once, low, even, confident. When the plates return empty, Saren gives you a curt nod. He asked for the recipe. That night, as you're packing away the knives for travel, negotiations having concluded in the Queen's favor, Chiron appears again. "You didn't just feed them," he says. "You reminded them she surrounds herself with people who never falter under pressure." You meet his gaze. "That's not a compliment, is it?" "It's a warning," he says, and leaves you with the wind howling against the lodge walls.
The journey back from Frostmere should feel like a victory. Negotiations closed in the Queen's favor, no culinary disasters to haunt your memory. But the moment the palace gates come into view, you sense something is off. The guards at the entrance are doubled. Their armor is polished, but the set of their shoulders speaks of unease. Inside, the corridors are too quiet, as if the usual hum of gossip has been swallowed whole. You barely have time to unload your travel crates before Saren intercepts you. "Straight to the kitchens," he orders. "No detours." You obey, though the urge to ask questions burns in your throat.
Only when you're safely behind the swinging oak doors does he speak again. There's been movement. Certain members of the council have been pressing the Queen harder than usual. She has enemies among them. You think back to the pantry whispers you overheard weeks ago and feel that old cold thread of tension pull tight again. The first official meal you prepare upon returning is meant for the full council. Normally, that would mean a carefully balanced banquet, dishes chosen to please every palate without overshadowing the Queen. But this time, the tone is different. Seren brings the order directly from her chambers. Make it bold. Make it hers. You choose a centerpiece of spiced sun-grain pilaf with roasted quail and plum glaze, rich, deeply flavored, unmistakably decadent. Around it, you arrange sides that speak of her reign's influence. Moon blossom salad from the palace gardens, frost flower soup from the far north, sea leaf fritters from the coast. As the dishes leave the kitchen, you can feel the air in the dining hall tighten, the council members weighing each bite as if it were a declaration. Through the open arch, you catch sight of the Queen. She sits straight-backed, her eyes sweeping the table like a general surveying a battlefield. When one counselor makes a thinly veiled jab about the expense of certain imports, she lifts her fork, takes another bite of the sea leaf fritters, and says nothing. Yet her silence feels like a shield slamming into place. When the meal ends, Seren returns to the kitchen, his expression unreadable. "You've made a statement," he says. That night, as you clean your knives, you find a folded scrap of parchment tucked beneath your cutting board. The handwriting is unfamiliar, but the message is simple. Be ready. The feast will decide more than dinner. You don't know who left it, you don't know when, but you tuck it into your pocket all the same.
The scrap of parchment burns in your pocket for the next 2 days. You don't mention it to Seren, and you definitely don't mention it to Chiron, though you suspect he already knows. When the official summons arrives, it confirms what you've been dreading, the coronation feast. Not for the Queen, her reign is long established, but for her niece, soon to be crowned as the Princess Heir. Every kingdom within alliance range will send representatives. Every noble with ambition will be in attendance. And the kitchen will be the stage on which reputations are made or crushed. The Queen gives no menu directives this time, only a single instruction. Show them who we are. You spend the next 48 hours drafting a progression of courses that speak to the kingdom's breadth and depth. An opening of river shell tartlets with bright frostberry coulis, star anise braised duck with jeweled grains, a centerpiece of ember-roasted stag glazed with moon honey, served alongside charred root medallions. For dessert, a trio of whispering confections, each releasing a breath of flavored steam when cracked open. The staff moves with a precision you've never seen before, the weight of the occasion sharpening every gesture. Chiron appears only twice, once to silently replace your dulling paring knife, and once to lean in close and say, "They will watch you as closely as the food." The feast begins in a swell of music and gold light. The first course earns polite applause. The second draws murmurs of appreciation. But it's the stag, the centerpiece, that shifts the air in the hall. You watch from the archway as platters are carried in, the glaze catching the light, the scent of moon honey curling through the air like a spell. The Princess Heir takes the first bite. Her smile blooms slow and certain, and the room follows her lead. By the time dessert is served, you can feel it in your bones. The feast has succeeded. Conversations grow warm, guarded smiles break into open laughter,
and the queen's gaze finds yours across the room. She inclines her head once, the smallest gesture of victory. Back in the kitchen, the noise from the hall feels distant, almost unreal. You set down your knives, aware that the night has altered something, not just in your standing, but in the way the palace itself regards you. Chiron steps from the shadows. "He showed them," he says, and for once, there's no warning in his voice.
The morning after the coronation feast dawns quiet, the kind of stillness that feels earned. The palace corridors are littered with traces of last night's grandeur: stray petals, overturned goblets, a half-forgotten mask lying in a pool of morning light. In the kitchen, the usual clatter is muted. The staff moves slowly, voices low, as though unwilling to disturb the lingering sense of triumph. You find yourself almost uneasy in the calm, as if the absence of urgency leaves too much space for questions. Saren arrives with a sealed envelope. "From the Queen," he says, placing it carefully on your station. Inside is a note, written in her precise, elegant hand. "Your craft speaks louder than politics. Do not forget, both can be dangerous." No signature, no formal seal, just the words. The rest of the day is taken up with smaller duties: breakfast for the Queen, tea for a handful of visiting dignitaries who haven't yet departed, and a steady stream of kitchen tidying. But you notice more than one servant lingering at the archway to watch you work. Some look curious, others calculating. Late in the afternoon, Chiron appears without his usual shadowed air. He sets a small wooden box on your counter. "For you," he says. Inside is a chef's knife unlike any you've handled before. Balanced perfectly, its blade etched with a pattern that catches the light like rippling water. The handle is carved from frostwood, smooth beneath your fingers. "Why?" you ask. "Because the Queen isn't the only one watching, and because you'll need it." That night, you carry a simple supper to the Queen's private chambers: a bowl of spiced root soup and a heel of fresh bread. She's seated near the window, the city's lanterns glittering far below. "You've kept me well fed," she says, almost idly, though her gaze doesn't leave the view. "And you've kept yourself alive. Not everyone in my court manages both." It isn't quite praise, it isn't quite a warning, but you understand it's the closest she'll come to saying you've earned your place. When you leave her chambers, the palace feels different under your feet. The corridors are still dangerous, the politics still sharp, but you've learned to navigate them, knife in hand, eyes open, ready for whatever comes next. The palace settles into its nocturnal rhythm, torches dimming to gentle embers, the great halls emptying into a hush that feels almost like a held breath. You move through the kitchen one last time, fingertips brushing the familiar wood of your station, the worn handles of your ladles, the cool gleam of copper pans catching the faint light. The scent of the day still lingers: roasted herbs, simmered broth, the sweetness of cooling bread. Beyond the kitchen doors, the stone corridors stretch into shadows, where the whispers of courtly schemes blend with the distant lull of the city outside. In the quiet, you think of every plate you've sent to the Queen, every unspoken battle fought with flavors and presentation. There have been victories, bold, undeniable moments when a bite turned the course of a conversation, and there have been near disasters you survived only through speed, instinct, and the occasional warning from an unexpected ally. You've learned that in this place, food is never just food. It's a language, a weapon, a shield, and you've become fluent in it. Somewhere above, the Queen sleeps, her crown set aside,
her appetite, both political and culinary, momentarily at rest. Tomorrow she will rise again to face the shifting tides of her reign, and you will be there, ready to meet those tides in the kitchen's heat, with the frostwood-handled knife at your side. The palace dreams in gold and silver. You breathe in the stillness, let it sink deep, and close your eyes. Sleep well.